I never imagined becoming the guy whose perfect marriage crumbles spectacularly before his eyes. The name's Aaron Rains, and this is the story of how I discovered my wife's betrayal and methodically dismantled everything she valued without raising my voice even once. We were Manhattan's golden couple. Claire, with her cascading blonde hair and razor-sharp mind, climbed through Hartwell Dynamics' corporate ranks with calculated precision. I transitioned from military intelligence to civilian cybersecurity, bringing strategic expertise to corporate America. Together, we projected unstoppable success, the power couple everyone secretly envied while smiling to our faces. Our Central Park-facing apartment showcased our success with floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the skyline like living artwork. Inside, everything bore Claire's immaculate taste. Expensive furniture arranged to impress visitors, art selected for investment value rather than emotional connection. We had the Instagram-perfect vacation photos, diversified investment portfolio, and memberships to clubs most New Yorkers only read about. The American dream packaged in Egyptian cotton and served with aged whiskey. I supported Claire's ruthless ambition. She respected my unwavering principles. The perfect partnership, everyone said. Even Claire's critical mother commented that we complemented each other like structure and decoration, though I later realized the backhanded nature of the comparison. We navigated 12 years of marriage, career changes, family deaths, and the decision not to have children with what I believed was honest communication, until that night when everything shattered with a single social media post. I was analyzing security vulnerabilities for a major financial client when my phone vibrated against my desk. Claire had posted on Instagram, unusual after 9 p.m. given her calculated social media schedule designed for optimal engagement. The photograph showed a crystal champagne flute, a man's hand casually resting on her bare shoulder, her signature red lipstick slightly smudged at the corner of her mouth. The caption read, "Partner who's always there." 10:57 p.m. The timestamp burned into my consciousness as I stared at Derek Brooks' distinctive gold Patek Philippe watch visible in the frame. A watch he'd mentioned cost more than my first car during last year's company Christmas party. Claire had dismissed him as just a colleague from corporate communications. Now his hand claimed my wife's shoulder at nearly 11 at night, broadcast to our entire social circle. I didn't react like most men would. No angry calls or threatening voicemails, no smashed glasses or emptied liquor bottles. Instead, I deliberately silenced my phone and opened my laptop to a fresh screen. My military intelligence training kicked in immediately. Emotional reactions lead to tactical errors. This wasn't just a questionable photo. This was the visible fragment of something much larger, concealed beneath the surface. The intelligence officer in me needed confirmation before making operational decisions. My security consultant position for Hartwell's contractor granted limited access to their internal systems, strictly for vulnerability assessments. Access I'd never abused until tonight, when the boundaries between personal and professional had already been crossed by others. Within minutes, I discovered something damning. Claire and Derek had been accessing the same restricted corporate archives using identical credentials, a blatant security protocol violation. Hartwell's policies required separate access credentials for accountability. Sharing login information warranted immediate termination, as it compromised the entire security infrastructure of sensitive corporate data. The muscle in my jaw twitched, the only external sign of the emotional tsunami brewing beneath my composed exterior. I now held the first thread of what would become an unraveling tapestry of deception. When Claire finally returned home at 1:43 a.m., expensive cologne that wasn't mine announced her arrival. Notes of cedar and bergamot hung around her like evidence. Her lipstick had been completely reapplied, though imperfectly, and her usually immaculate hair showed subtle disarray that spoke volumes. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, kicking off her Louboutins that clattered against the marble entryway. The presentation preparation took absolutely forever. The Tokyo client is impossibly demanding. I looked up from my book, voice emerging perfectly steady. "I'm glad you have such a motivated work partner. Dedication like that is hard to find." Something flickered across her features. Surprise at my tranquility. She clearly expected questions about her lateness, accusations about another man's cologne. Instead, she received measured composure that visibly unsettled her. Derek really knows how to push for absolute perfection, she added cautiously, studying my reaction while reaching for water. Sounds like a tremendously valuable colleague, I replied evenly, deliberately turning a page. Every successful person needs someone who challenges them professionally. My composed response clearly disturbed her more than any jealous outburst would have. She retreated to our bathroom, and soon the powerful shower ran. While cascading water masked other sounds, I silently forwarded myself copies of the system logs, photographed our financial statements, and created backups of our shared cloud drive containing important documents. That night, I slept beside my wife with cold precision forming in my mind. The warmth that once existed between us, the instinctive reaching for each other during sleep, had been replaced by calculated distance. I wouldn't confront her emotionally, not yet. First, I needed to understand the complete architecture of betrayal constructed around me. For 17 days, I maintained perfect normalcy while methodically gathering evidence. With military thoroughness, I never raised my voice, never showed suspicion. I remained the same supportive husband, making breakfast before her meetings, sending encouraging texts before presentations, listening attentively to work stories that now carried double meanings I carefully cataloged. Meanwhile, I established a secure server at my office and compiled comprehensive records. Claire and Derek had exchanged increasingly personal messages through Hartwell's communication platform for 7 months. Professional exchanges evolved into intimate late-night conversations, then explicit planning of hotel meetings disguised as client consultations. Most damaging, they shared confidential client information across departments without authorization. This wasn't just infidelity, it constituted potential corporate espionage with serious professional and legal consequences for everyone involved, including me through association. One message exchange burned permanently into my memory. Derek, are you absolutely sure your husband doesn't suspect anything? Security analysts are trained to notice inconsistencies. Claire, Aaron, please, he trusts me completely. Military men are so predictably honorable, it makes everything easier. His straightforward thinking is both his greatest strength and his ultimate weakness. Reading those dismissive words about principles I considered fundamental to my identity, something inside me hardened permanently. My wife hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she had weaponized my trust, used my sense of honor as a convenient blindfold while dismantling our relationship. I printed copies of everything, stored digital backups on encrypted drives, and continued smiling at breakfast each morning as if our world remained intact. When Claire mentioned the upcoming Hartwell Dynamics annual conference with unusual enthusiasm, I mentally added another data point to my collection. The annual conference arrived 3 weeks after the Instagram post, a lavish Plaza Hotel affair where executives, clients, and partners celebrated company achievements. Claire had prepared meticulously, selecting a designer dress, crafting talking points as PR head, and spending extra salon time ensuring flawless appearance. Will you be my date for the evening? She asked with that smile that once accelerated my heartbeat, but now registered as tactical manipulation. Wouldn't miss it for anything, I replied convincingly, kissing her forehead while mentally reviewing strategic opportunities the event would provide. The ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers reflecting off polished surfaces and equally polished facades of New York's business elite. I played my role flawlessly, the proud, supportive husband mingling with her colleagues, laughing at industry jokes, complimenting executives' spouses with perfect charm, all while keeping Derek Brooks positioned within my peripheral awareness. He was tall with the cultivated appearance of generational wealth attempting to present as self-made success, designer suit emphasizing athletic shoulders, strategically noticeable watch, and professionally whitened smile deployed during conversations. Throughout the evening, I observed their subtle choreography, maintaining professional distance in groups but exchanging charged glances across rooms, timing separate departures for brief overlapping absences, maintaining appropriate space except during momentary lapses when they believed no one watched. But I watched with trained observation skills, and so did the professional photographer Hartwell had hired to document the event. Early in the evening, I introduced myself to the photographer, a bearded man with multiple cameras hanging from a specialized harness. My wife is incredibly photogenic, I told him, with seemingly genuine pride. Claire Rains, head of PR. I'd appreciate any candid shots of her in professional action. She's been working extremely hard on this event. No problem at all, sir, he assured me professionally. I'll make sure to capture her throughout the evening. The candids often tell the best story. What Claire and Derek never considered, their supposedly discreet interactions were being documented throughout the night. Her hand lingering on his arm, him whispering something causing genuine laughter, rather than her practiced professional chuckle. The two of them slipping onto a terrace with champagne when they thought everyone was distracted by the CEO's announcement. The next morning, the photographer uploaded all images to Hartwell's shared media server, standard procedure for event documentation. I accessed this through legitimate security credentials as part of my vulnerability assessment. There they were, dozens of high-resolution images telling their unmistakable story. The most damning showed them in a supposedly private terrace moment, her head tilted back in unrestrained laughter, as his lips nearly brushed her ear, his hand positioned possessively where no colleagues should be. I downloaded these immediately, added them to my evidence collection, and waited patiently for the next phase to unfold. Hartwell's communications team, under Claire's direction, selected specific photographs for the official press release. They chose carefully, group shots showing diverse leadership, executive portraits, client testimonials. Safe professional images reinforcing Hartwell's desired narrative. What they missed, a seemingly insignificant background detail in one selected photograph. Claire and Derek reflected in a decorative mirror, his hand on the small of her back, her body leaning into his touch. This photograph went out in the official press release to industry publications, major clients, and key stakeholders throughout their business ecosystem. Through professional connections and karmic justice, one recipient was legal counsel for a financial technology company I consulted with on cybersecurity. The counsel recognized Derek as a consultant peripherally involved in a sensitive regulatory case directly involving my client, creating a clear conflict of interest given his undisclosed relationship with Claire and, by extension, me. The counsel immediately contacted Hartwell's legal department to report the potential ethics breach. Corporate accountability machinery began moving with the ruthless efficiency that emerges when liability concerns surface. I was delivering a security assessment presentation when my phone vibrated repeatedly with increasingly desperate messages from Claire. Emergency situation at work. Being called to legal immediately. Not sure what's happening. Aaron, please call me back immediately. Something serious is happening. Why aren't you answering? I need to talk to you before this meeting with legal and HR. I finished my presentation without rushing, accepted compliments on my thoroughness, and calmly scheduled implementation timelines before checking messages. I sent a single response. In meetings all afternoon, we'll call when finished. When I arrived home that evening, Claire sat at our kitchen island, untouched wine before her, staring blankly at the Manhattan skyline through our windows. Her perfect appearance showed significant distress. Mascara smudged beneath reddened eyes, immaculate hair disheveled, posture conveying defeat rather than characteristic confidence. They're conducting a formal investigation, she said without turning. Someone reported a potential conflict of interest between me and Derek. They have photographs from the conference, Aaron. Photographs suggesting an inappropriate relationship. I removed my suit jacket and hung it precisely on a chair back. What kind of photographs would suggest something inappropriate between colleagues? My tone remained neutral, curious rather than accusatory. She finally turned, carefully studying my face for clues. Nothing explicitly inappropriate, just moments that could be misinterpreted without context. Derek stands closer than most Americans consider normal. His European background. People are misinterpreting perfectly innocent professional interactions. I see, I responded thoughtfully, loosening my tie deliberately. And is there anything beyond professional collegiality that might give credibility to these concerns? Any reason someone might interpret your relationship as crossing boundaries? The question hung between us like a delicate glass sculpture, fragile, transparent, but potentially devastating. This was her opportunity for honesty, her chance to admit the truth before I revealed my knowledge. A window for voluntary confession that might have changed everything that followed. Claire swallowed visibly. Absolutely nothing beyond normal professional collaboration. Derek's naturally expressive and doesn't understand American corporate culture yet. People are misinterpreting innocent interactions because they're looking for drama. I nodded, slowly poured myself water, and with my back toward her, asked precisely, and the late nights? The hotel meetings registered as client consultations? The shared access to restricted files? The messages about keeping your relationship concealed? Are those being misinterpreted as well? The silence behind me became oppressive. When I turned, Claire's face had drained completely of color, even her carefully applied blush standing out artificially against suddenly pallid skin. How could you possibly know? Her voice failed before completing the question. Know what, Claire? I finished for her, setting my water glass down with controlled precision. That you've been involved romantically with Derek for 7 months? That you've compromised company security protocols? That you've created serious conflicts of interest that could damage both our careers? I've known for weeks. You've been spying on me. Her voice elevated with manufactured indignation, attempting to reposition herself as victim rather than perpetrator. Classic deflection tactics I recognized from interrogation psychology. I laughed softly without humor. No, Claire. I've been protecting myself from someone who demonstrated she couldn't be trusted. There's a fundamental difference between surveillance and self-preservation. I retrieved my briefcase, removed a thick manila envelope, and placed it deliberately between us. Everything is documented inside. System logs showing unauthorized shared access, message transcripts, hotel receipts fraudulently coded as client consultations, time-stamped photographs establishing a pattern of deception. Everything, Claire. She stared at the envelope as though it might contain something venomous. Aaron, I can explain everything if you'll just listen rationally. I'm sure you believe you can explain convincingly, I interrupted calmly. You're the head of corporate communications. Crafting persuasive narratives is literally what Hartwell pays you 6 figures to accomplish. Managing perceptions, redirecting attention from problems. You're remarkably skilled at reality manipulation. But I'm not a perception to be managed. I'm the husband you betrayed systematically while mocking my principles behind my back. Please, she whispered as genuine tears spilled down her cheeks, creating dark rivulets through expensive foundation. We can work through this together. The relationship was a mistake that happened gradually. It didn't mean anything emotionally. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and experienced nothing beyond clinical disappointment and hollow recognition that I'd built my life around someone I never truly knew. That makes everything worse. You risked our marriage, professional reputations, and entire life together for something that didn't mean anything emotionally. That reveals more about your character than perhaps you intended. My phone vibrated with an incoming message. I checked the screen, then returned my attention to Claire. That was my contact at Hartwell. Derek Brooks has been immediately transferred to the Seattle office, effective tomorrow. Apparently, Hartwell takes conflicts of interest and security breaches seriously once brought to senior leadership attention. He signed a non-communication agreement regarding certain colleagues as part of his transfer. He won't contact you again unless he wants significant contractual penalties. Her face crumpled as professional and personal implications registered fully. What have you done? I haven't done anything, I replied with genuine calmness. I simply stopped shielding you from the natural consequences of your deliberate choices. There's a significant difference. I left her staring at the untouched envelope and went to our bedroom, soon exclusively my bedroom, where I efficiently packed an overnight bag with her essential items. When I returned, she remained frozen, staring at the envelope as though willpower might make it disappear. You should stay somewhere else tonight, I stated, placing the bag beside her chair. I've arranged a car service. The driver will arrive in 15 minutes. You're throwing me out of our home? Her voice emerged small and disbelieving, as though this consequence was somehow more shocking than anything preceding it. I'm creating necessary space for both of us, I corrected. Tomorrow, my attorney will contact yours with a proposed dissolution agreement. It's more generous than circumstances warrant. I suggest you accept initial terms rather than pursuing alternatives. Aaron, please, she stood, reaching toward me without making contact. 12 years of marriage and partnership. You cannot end everything without trying to work through this. I stepped backward, maintaining physical distance reflecting our emotional reality. I didn't end our marriage, Claire. Your consistent choices over 7 months accomplished that effectively. The moment you decided I wasn't deserving of basic loyalty, you terminated our relationship. I'm simply processing the paperwork. The doorbell announced her car service. I retrieved her bag and extended it without commentary. Goodbye, Claire. After she departed with surprising quietness, I poured exactly 2 fingers of Macallan 18 into a crystal tumbler and sat watching the Manhattan skyline transition through sunset into the artificial constellation of skyscraper lights. The following morning, my attorney delivered the dissolution agreement to Claire's lawyer. I'd been developing it systematically since discovering initial evidence. The agreement was financially generous. Claire would receive a substantial lump sum, but uncompromising on certain points. Our apartment would remain my property exclusively, as would the majority of our investment portfolio and retirement accounts. Most significantly, it included a comprehensive non-disclosure provision with substantial financial penalties for violations. Claire would be legally prohibited from discussing our separation details with anyone, including family, friends, colleagues, and especially media contacts. This condition would inflict the most psychological impact. Claire's identity centered around narrative control, being the authoritative source shaping how situations were perceived. This agreement would silence her completely, forcing her to accept whatever narrative emerged without her management. By noon, Hartwell's Human Resources Department contacted me directly. As a contractor connected to the situation, they requested my formal statement regarding any knowledge of Claire and Derek's relationship and whether it potentially compromised client work. I discovered evidence recently, I explained truthfully. I've reviewed all my client files and confirmed no compromising information was shared through my channels. However, I cannot speak regarding what information Claire and Derek may have exchanged directly through other communication methods. This careful phrasing implanted significant concern without direct accusations. The HR director's sharp intake of breath confirmed the message registered precisely as intended. Mr. Rains, would you provide a signed statement for our investigation and potentially review specific files to determine if security breaches occurred through these unauthorized communications? Of course, I agreed readily. I'm committed to protecting company interests and client confidentiality. I'll provide whatever assistance your investigation requires. By day's end, Claire had been placed on administrative suspension pending investigation completion. The scope expanded beyond initial conflict of interest concerns to include potential corporate espionage and security protocol violations, substantially more serious charges with career-ending and legal implications. She called 23 times throughout the day. I allowed each call to redirect to voicemail without response. When I finally reviewed her accumulated messages that evening, the progression from defensive anger to mounting panic to desperate pleading was unmistakable. How dare you speak with HR without consulting me first? This is completely unprofessional. Aaron, they're claiming I potentially leaked confidential information. You know that's untrue. The investigation is expanding. They've confiscated my company devices and restricted system access. My entire career is imploding. Please, Aaron, just tell them you misspoke about security concerns. They trust your assessment completely. One word from you could save everything I've worked for. I methodically deleted each message after listening, processing information without emotional reaction. 5 days later, Claire was formally terminated from Hartwell Dynamics. The official reason, multiple violations of company ethics policies and security protocols. Whispers about information leakage and conflicts of interest permeated throughout Manhattan's corporate communications world, creating devastating professional ripple effects that would follow her indefinitely. That evening, she arrived unannounced at our apartment, looking dramatically different from the polished executive she'd always presented. Her hair hung limp without styling, her face showed minimal makeup failing to conceal exhaustion, her clothing casual instead of designer business attire. "You destroyed my entire professional life," she accused immediately when I opened the door, her voice raw with unfiltered emotion. I stepped aside silently, allowing entry without comment. My continued composure remained my most effective shield against manipulation. I never leaked confidential information, she continued, pacing our living room agitatedly. That accusation is completely fabricated, and you know it. Do I know that with certainty? I questioned quietly. You accessed restricted files using shared credentials, a fundamental security violation. You discussed client matters in non-secure communications. You charged unauthorized hotel meetings using falsified expense classifications. From a security perspective, information leakage seems entirely plausible given established protocol violations. That's completely different from corporate espionage, and you know it, she insisted vehemently, hands trembling with emotional intensity. I shrugged neutrally. Perception becomes reality in corporate environments. Currently, the perception among decision makers is that you potentially compromise sensitive information through unauthorized channels. Whether you actually did becomes almost irrelevant once the narrative solidifies within organizational consciousness. She stared with dawning comprehension. You orchestrated all of this, the entire sequence of events. You wanted me to lose everything. No, I corrected precisely. I simply stopped protecting you from the natural professional consequences of your actions. There's a fundamental difference in both intent and execution. Our marriage may be damaged, she acknowledged directly, but you didn't need to dismantle my entire professional identity and reputation. Similar to how you dismantled mine? I countered, permitting measured emotion through my composed exterior. When you created a serious conflict of interest with my clients through your undisclosed relationship, when you compromised my professional reputation for integrity by creating ethical complications I wasn't aware existed, when you laughed with your lover about how pathetically, predictably honorable I was, while simultaneously dishonoring everything we built. For perhaps the first time ever, Claire had no prepared response. The communications professional who always maintained perfect message discipline was rendered completely speechless by the comprehensive consequences of her actions. I've signed the dissolution agreement, I informed her, gesturing toward the document on our coffee table. Your copies are prepared, with signature lines marked. Your attorney has reviewed everything as confirmed by his counter-signature. Sign now, and we can proceed towards separate futures without complications. She lifted the papers with visibly unsteady hands. And if I refuse these terms, then we proceed through standard litigation, I stated matter-of-factly. Full disclosure of all evidence in court proceedings. Every message, every photograph, every hotel receipt entered into public record with complete documentation. Your professional indiscretions becoming permanently searchable in court databases. Your choice entirely, Claire. She signed without further protest, not from cooperation, but from pragmatic self-preservation. As she returned the signed documents, vulnerability flickered across her features. Was any of it real? Our relationship? I believed it was, I answered simply. Every day for 12 years. I did love you, Aaron. In my way. Your way proved catastrophically insufficient, I replied without intentional cruelty, simply stating objective reality. Goodbye, Claire. After her departure, I sent the signed documents to my attorney. The legal dissolution was officially underway. Throughout subsequent weeks, I maintained professional distance while observing Claire's continuing downfall. Without her prestigious position, she lost the professional identity she'd cultivated for years. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. Industry events no longer included her. Professional doors closed permanently. Financial reality forced her to lease a small Brooklyn apartment, dramatically downscaled from our Central Park doorman building. I knew this from formal address notification rather than active monitoring. I focused on rebuilding my life. I expanded my client portfolio, channeled residual anger into boxing, reconnected with military colleagues, and eventually began dating casually. Nothing serious yet, but connections reminding me that genuine relationships existed. 6 months later, my attorney contacted me with unexpected information that changed everything. Aaron, there's something you should know about Claire, he said, sounding uncharacteristically concerned. She's been named in a federal investigation involving corporate espionage. Apparently, some of those security breaches you suspected were much more serious than initially believed. My stomach tightened instantly. What specifically are they investigating? The FBI believes Derek Brooks was passing sensitive information to competitors through Claire. They've seized all her electronic devices and financial records. The investigation suggests significant payments were routed through offshore accounts linked indirectly to her personal finances. I sat heavily in my office chair, genuinely shocked despite everything that had transpired. Was she actively selling information? The evidence suggests she was, potentially for years. The authorities believe your discovery of their affair accelerated their timeline and led to operational mistakes that exposed the larger scheme. They're building a case for conspiracy, wire fraud, and multiple violations of corporate espionage statutes. Serious federal charges carrying significant prison sentences. The news spread rapidly throughout New York's corporate community. Claire, once the rising PR star with unlimited potential, was now publicly labeled a corporate spy. Her name appeared in Wall Street Journal headlines. Her professional photograph displayed alongside stories about betrayed corporate trust in criminal investigations. Former colleagues who had maintained connections, despite her Hartwell termination, now completely disavowed any association. Social acquaintances denied knowing her beyond casual introduction. The professional and social isolation became absolute and devastating. 2 weeks later, while meeting a new client for dinner, I spotted Claire sitting alone at a corner table in the same restaurant. The transformation was shocking. She appeared 10 years older, her once immaculate appearance completely disheveled, her physical presence diminished to near invisibility. She nursed a single glass of wine while staring vacantly at nothing. Our eyes connected briefly across the room. Rather than the defiance or anger I expected, her expression contained only hollow defeat and recognition of irrevocable consequences. Without acknowledging me further, she paid her bill and departed quickly, shoulders hunched against inevitable public recognition. The criminal case progressed rapidly. Evidence mounted daily against both Claire and Derek. My security expertise proved valuable to federal prosecutors building their case, though I provided information strictly as a technical witness rather than pursuing personal vengeance. 3 months later, Derek accepted a plea agreement, testifying against Claire in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony proved devastating, detailed accounts of her initiating the information selling scheme, coordinating with competitors, establishing payment channels, and using their romantic relationship partly as cover for their criminal enterprise. The evening before jury selection began for her trial, Claire's attorney contacted mine with an unexpected request. She wanted to meet with me privately before potentially facing years in federal prison. Against my attorney's explicit advice, I agreed to a brief meeting at a neutral location, a small conference room in my attorney's office building. When Claire entered, I barely recognized the woman I'd spent 12 years with. The confident executive had vanished completely, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger in department store clothing. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said quietly, her voice lacking any remnant of its former authoritative tone. I nodded without speaking, waiting for her to continue. "I wanted to tell you something before everything becomes permanently public record," she continued, hands fidgeting nervously with a tissue. "I never meant for any of this to happen. The information sharing with Derek started small, just helping each other with presentations, sharing client insights. Then someone offered money for specific information, and suddenly we were crossing lines I never imagined crossing." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, maintaining emotional distance despite the surreal circumstances. "Because I realize now that you were the only genuine thing in my life," she responded, tears forming. "Everything else was performance and calculation. Our marriage was the one relationship that could have saved me from myself, and I destroyed it for nothing." "It wasn't nothing," I corrected her. "It was money, advancement, excitement, all things you valued more than integrity or commitment." She nodded slowly, accepting this truth without argument. "The prosecutors offered a deal this morning, 5 years with potential reduction for cooperation. I'm accepting it tomorrow." "That seems reasonable considering the alternatives," I observed neutrally. "They're also requiring complete asset forfeiture," she continued, voice breaking slightly. "Everything I've acquired over the past decade. The financial penalties will leave me with nothing after serving time." I absorbed this information without visible reaction. "What do you want from me, Claire?" "Nothing," she answered with surprising directness. "I just wanted you to hear directly from me that you were right about everything. Your instincts were perfect from the beginning. If I had been half as honest with you as you were with me, none of this would have happened. Perhaps, I acknowledged noncommittally, but we can't rewrite history. No, she agreed, rising to leave. We certainly cannot. At the door, she paused briefly. I genuinely hope you find someone worthy of your loyalty, Aaron. I clearly never deserved it. 1 week later, news outlets reported Claire's guilty plea and 5-year federal prison sentence. The judge's comments during sentencing were particularly harsh, calling her actions a profound betrayal of professional trust and a cautionary tale about integrity in corporate America. The complete asset forfeiture left her financially ruined, with nothing awaiting her release except a permanently damaged reputation and unemployable status in her field. That evening, as I watched the news coverage from my apartment, I received an unexpected email from Claire's cousin, someone I'd met only twice during our marriage. Aaron, Claire asked me to forward this message before beginning her sentence tomorrow. She said you deserve to know the full truth, even though it changes nothing. The attached document contained Claire's complete confession, not just about Derek and the corporate espionage, but about 3 previous affairs during our marriage that I'd never suspected. The document detailed her systematic deception, including separate bank accounts, burner phones, and elaborate cover stories maintained for years while presenting herself as the perfect wife. The final paragraph simply read, "You deserve so much better than the life I gave you. The facade of happiness I maintained while betraying you in every possible way. Your predictable honor wasn't weakness, as I foolishly believed. It was strength I never understood until losing everything. I hope someday you'll find happiness with someone capable of appreciating the man I never truly saw until it was far too late." I closed the email without responding, then permanently deleted it along with all other electronic records of our relationship. Claire's public disgrace and imprisonment represented the final chapter in a story I was ready to conclude. 6 months later, while attending a cybersecurity conference in Boston, I met Catherine, an intelligence analyst with quick wit and genuine warmth that required no calculation or performance. Our connection developed naturally, built on shared interests in transparent communication rather than image management or status considerations. One evening, after dinner at her apartment, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Your divorce made the news because of the corporate espionage case. Does talking about that bother you?" "Not anymore," I answered honestly. "It's a chapter of my life that's closed completely." "Do you ever wonder what happens when she's released?" Catherine asked with natural curiosity rather than judgment. I shook my head. Her future stopped being my concern the night I discovered her betrayal. Whatever life she builds after prison will happen entirely separate from mine. "That sounds remarkably healthy," she observed with a small smile. "It took time to reach this perspective," I admitted, but I eventually realized that continuing to track her downfall served no purpose except anchoring me to the past. Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Some people never escape their past mistakes. Others find ways to reinvent themselves completely. And some people discover that what appeared to be catastrophic endings sometimes create space for much better beginnings," I added, taking her hand across the table. The following morning, headlines announced another unexpected development in Claire's story. An investigative journalism piece revealed that following her imprisonment, multiple former associates had come forward with additional allegations about her professional misconduct, stretching back years before our marriage. The article detailed systematic deception, manipulated evidence, and professional sabotage of colleagues throughout her career. The promising executive once featured in 30 Under 30 lists was now permanently redefined as one of the most notorious corporate criminals of the decade. I closed the news app without finishing the article. Claire's continuing downfall no longer held any relevance to my life. The woman I'd married had effectively ceased existing, replaced by a cautionary tale in business ethics seminars and case studies about professional misconduct. That evening, watching the sunset from Catherine's balcony, I experienced something I hadn't felt since before discovering Claire's betrayal. Genuine contentment, unmarred by suspicion or strategizing. The future stretched before me without the shadow of deception that had colored 12 years of my life. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked, leaning against my shoulder comfortably. That sometimes the most valuable skill isn't detecting deception, I replied, but recognizing authenticity when you finally encounter it. She smiled, understanding the significance without requiring elaboration. Took you long enough. I laughed with genuine amusement. Some lessons require learning the hard way. As night fell over Boston, city lights reflecting against low clouds, I silently acknowledged the unexpected truth that had emerged from chaos. Claire's betrayal had ultimately freed me from a relationship built on performance rather than partnership. Her devastating fall had cleared space for genuine connection with someone capable of honesty and reciprocal respect. The life Claire now faced, imprisonment followed by professional exile and financial ruin, represented justice delivered through natural consequences rather than vengeful orchestration. I had simply stopped protecting her from the reality of her choices, allowing truth to emerge with its inevitable repercussions. Meanwhile, I had reconstructed a life anchored in authenticity rather than appearances, valuing substance over status, and recognizing that genuine trust, once established, required neither constant verification nor strategic management. Catherine squeezed my hand gently, bringing me back to the present moment. Ready to go inside? Absolutely, I replied, leaving thoughts of the past outside where they belonged and following her toward a future unburdened by deception's weight. 2 years later, news briefly circulated about Claire's early release from prison due to exemplary behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations. According to limited coverage, she had completed paralegal training during incarceration and secured modest employment with a small legal firm specializing in white-collar defense, lawyers who understood redemption narratives and second chances. The same week, Catherine accepted my proposal during a weekend in Vermont, the antithesis of the elaborate Manhattan engagement Claire had orchestrated years earlier. No social media announcements, no strategic timing for maximum attention, just genuine commitment between two people who had learned to value transparency above all else. When we returned home, a plain envelope awaited in my mail without return address. Inside, a simple note card contained just one sentence in handwriting I still recognize despite everything. Congratulations on finding what I could never give you. I placed the card back in its envelope without showing Catherine, then discarded it completely. Claire's acknowledgement of my happiness meant nothing compared to the happiness itself. The following morning, Catherine and I began planning our future together. A life built on mutual respect rather than performance, authentic connection rather than strategic advantage, and the shared understanding that relationships thrive not through perfect appearances, but through perfect honesty, even when uncomfortable truths must be confronted. Claire's spectacular downfall, from corporate star to federal inmate to cautionary example, had captured media attention briefly before fading into obscurity. Meanwhile, I had discovered that life's most meaningful victories aren't measured by someone else's losses, but by your own capacity to rebuild after devastation with greater wisdom and authenticity than before. As Catherine and I discussed potential wedding dates, I realized with absolute certainty that Claire's betrayal, while painful, had ultimately delivered me from a beautiful illusion into a far more valuable reality. A life where genuine connection replaced perfect appearances, and where honesty, however difficult, always trumped comforting deception. The man who discovered his wife's infidelity through an Instagram post at 10:57 p.m. had evolved into someone stronger, wiser, and ultimately happier than the person who believed himself perfectly married to a woman who never truly existed beyond her carefully constructed facade. And that transformation, I reflected while watching Catherine sketch preliminary wedding plans, represented the most meaningful outcome of a betrayal that had once seemed impossible to survive.